Om Vakradunda
Om Vakradunda
Mahakaya
Mahakaya
Surya Koti
Suryakoti
Samaprabha
Samaprabha Nirvignam
Nirvignam
Kuru
Kuru
Me
Me
Deva
Deva
Sarvakaryeshu
Sarvakaryeshu
Sarvada
Sarvada Saraswati
Saraswati
Namastubhyam
Namastubhyam Varate
Vadate
Kamarudini
Kamarupini Vidyarambham
Vidyarambham
Karishyami
Karishyami Siddhir
Siddhir
Bhavatu
Bhavatu
Me
Me
Sada
Sada
Guru
Gurur
Brahma
Brahma
Guru
Gurur
Vishnu
Vishnu
Guru
Gurur
Devo
Devo
Maheshwaraha
Maheshwaraha Guru
Guru
Sakshat
Sakshat
Param
Param
Brahma
Brahma
Tasmai
Tasmai
Shri
Shri
Gurave
Gurave
Namaha
Namaha Om
Om Sahana
Sahana Bhavatu
Bhavatu
Sahano
Sahano
Bhunaktu
Bhunaktu
Sahavirya
Sahaviryam
Karavavahai
Karavavahai
Tejasvinavadhitamastu
Tejasvinavadhitamastu
ma
Vidvishavahai
vidvishavahai Om
Om
Shanti
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 Shanti Om Shri Paramatmane Namaha
Om Shri Paramatmane Namaha
Atah Panchamodhyayaha
Atha Panchamo Dhyayaha
Shri Bhagavanuvacha
Shri Bhagavanuvacha
Shloka number 21 Bhagyasparsheshvasaktatma Vindatyatmani Yat Sukham
Bhahyasparsheshvasaktatma Vindathyatmani Yatsukham
Sabrahma Yoga Yuktatma Sukhamakshayamashnute.
Sabrahma Yoga Yukthatma Sukhamakshayamashnude.
This is a shloka we have to see today. The previous shloka we saw, na pragrishit priyam prapya, na udvichet apriyam prapya. Priyam na pragrishit priyam prapya, na udvichet priyam aprapya. That means he is free from ragadvesha, therefore buddhi is knowledge is steady in Brahma. Now, the next shloka, the following shloka 21, Bhagavan describes the happiness of such people. Sukham. What Sukham is? Swarupa Sukham, it is Atma Sukham. That is Ananda. The Swarukam is not borrowed, it is Atma Sukham, Swarupa Sukham. Priyam Prapya na Pragrishyat. Apriyam Prapya na Udvijit. Then is it indifferent to Sukha Dukkha? Means is dwells in Brahma. Brahma is Aham Atma Brahma, therefore Swarupanande. Swarupanandaha. Vishayananda also Brahma. And Swarupananda. This is the Ananda is not borrowed. It is not. It is doesn't come from external sources. It is oneself. So therefore, Bhagya Sparsheshu Asaktatma with Bhagya Sparsha. Sparsha referring to the here objects. Bhagya Sparsha, external objects. Sparsha meaning objects. Sparsha means touch. So touch means touch of the sense organs with the sense objects. That is Sparsha. Bhagya is external. So therefore, with reference to Saptami Vibhakti, Bhagya Sparsheshu Vindati Atmani Yat Sukham. Bhagyasu Sparsheshu Asaktatma, Na Saktatma. Atma here it is, mind. Asaktaha Atma Antakaranam Yasya Saha. The one whose Atma Antakaranam is not attached. With reference to the contact of the, with reference to this pleasure of the sense objects of the sense organs. With reference to the pleasure which is born of the contact of the sense organs with the sense objects. Asaktaha Atma, the one who is attached and not attached. Atmani yat sukham. Atmani, that is in the Atma, yat sukham, vartate vindati. That Atma sukham Atma is Sukham, Sukha Swarupaha Atma. Therefore, Vindati, Prapnoti, that is what Vindati is. So, not the Ananda, which is not the Ananda, which is born out of the contact of the sense object, the sense organs. Here, Atmani Sukham. Atmani Sukham, he gains that happiness which is in oneself, which is oneself. Atmani, in the Atma. The Atma, it is not in the Atma something, it is oneself. It is oneself, and that Atma, the Sukham is Vindati. Saha Brahma Yoga Yukta Atma. Sukham Akshayam Ashnute. Here also, Yukta Atma, Yuktaha Atma Antakaranam. What Antakarnam? Antakarnam is, the mind is Brahma Yoga, that is knowledge of Brahma. Brahma Yoga Yukta Atma, whose mind is endowed with the knowledge of Brahma. That is Brahmani Stitaha, the previous shloka we saw the same thing. Brahmani Astitaha, the mind is endowed with the knowledge of Brahma. He gains Akshayam Sukham, Sukham which is not subject to change. Ashnute gains Vindati, same meaning. So therefore, the one whose mind is not attached to the external sense objects that contact the sense organs gains that happiness, which is oneself. One whose mind is endowed with the knowledge of Brahma gains that happiness which doesn't wax and wane, doesn't subject to change. It is what Akshayam Sukham. Kshaya is subject to change. Akshaya, that which doesn't undergo any change, doesn't increase or doesn't decrease. Whereas Ananda, which is obtained from the external sources, are subject to decrease and increase. But this is Akshayam Sukham, therefore doesn't undergo any change. This shloka can be interpreted in two ways. First, we will see how Shankaracharya explains it. Then we will see the other interpretation. Bhagya Sparsha refers to external objects that come into contact with the sense organs. Bhagya Sparsha means touch. Therefore, contact of the sense organs with the sense objects. This compound, samasa, is resolved by Shankaracharya as Bhagyascha te Sparshascha, meaning that they are external. Bhagyaha, they come into contact with the sense organs, Sparsha. So, since Sparshaha, sense objects, Bhagyaha, external. So, Sparsha generally it is used in the sense of touch, Sparsha, the skin, Sparsha, there is Indriya, Tagindriya. That which is experienced by the sense of touch is called Sparsha. So, therefore, it is used in the sense of touch. Therefore, extending this meaning, any object that comes into contact is called Sparsha. Therefore, Bhagyaha, Sparsha. Sparsha meaning, Bhagya means external sense objects that come into contact with the sense organ Sparsha. Sparsha meaning Sparshendriya, that is Twagindriya. That is only Upalakshana. It refers to all these sense organs. Any sense organs come into contact with any sense object. It means a person coming in contact with the sense object. Contact of the sense organs with the sense objects. That is the meaning. Therefore, all the sense objects, Shabda Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa, Gandha, they are Sparshaha, they are external, Bhagyaha. Therefore, they are Bhagya Sparshaha. So, therefore, external objects, Shabdadeyaha, Shabda Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa, Gandha, sound, etc., includes sounds, forms, touch, taste, and smell. And with reference to these external objects, Bhagya Sparsheshu, the person is Asaktatma, that is, his or her mind, Atma is uninvolved. Asaktaha, Atma, Antakarnam, Yeshamte, with any of them, meaning that the person's mind is not hooked by them, not attached by them. In other words, the fancies of the mind do not bother the person. The one whose mind is not carried away by such fancies with reference to external sense objects is therefore described in the shloka in two words, Bhagyasparsheshu Asaktatma iti. Then freedom from longing. Bhagyasparsheshu Asaktatma, therefore there is no longing. Bhagavan Shankaracharya expresses this Bhagyasparsheshu Asaktatma as one who is free from longing, yearning with reference to the sense objects. Vishayeshu Preeti Varjita. Preeti is love. So is Varjita free from the love for the Vishaya, that is external objects. A person who doesn't missed is external objects. Vishayeshu priti varjita. This being so, the person gains happiness that is in the Atma. Atmani yata sukam tatu vindate. Atma here means Sachit Anandaha Atma. So external objects being there, and there is contact of the sense organ with sense objects, but there is no longing for this person. Then, because he has discovered Atma, which is Ananda. So, what this limited Ananda, Vishayananda can do, therefore, it cannot. It doesn't get fulfillment in Vishayananda. He is fulfilled in Atmananda. Happiness, sukha, has to be mentioned in this way because people generally think that the objects themselves give them sukha. It is not so. But the wise person is also happy without objects being instrumental in any way. The wise person is not elated by objects. Then how does he become happy? How does a wise person become happy? Generally, the happiness of a person is determined by the objects. Priyam prapya, gaining the desired objects. Therefore, a person is generally happy. But how does a wise person be happy? Because he doesn't have longing for objects. He doesn't have longing for Vishayas. When the Vishaya Icha is fulfilled, a person is happy. But in the case of Jnani, how does he become happy? Now, Pragrishate, Priyam Prapya, not elated by the objects, and Bhagya Sparsheshu, Asaktatma, then how does he become happy? He's happy, Atmani, is happy with himself, because all the happiness is with himself. Swarupananda. Therefore, Sukham here it is the very Swarupa, the nature of Atma. Sachit Ananda, that Ananda. Anantatvam, Purnatvam, that is Ananda. Thus, the word Sukha really means fullness here. Fullness meaning Atma's nature. This Sukha, fullness, is gained by the Jnani who knows that the Atma is not affected by the external objects that come into contact with the sense organs. Therefore, he or she gains the Sukha that obtains in the Atma, which is the person's Swarupa. And how do we know that the person being discussed here is wise? The next line points out, along with the context provided by the previous shloka. Sukham Akshayam Ashnute. Brahma Yoga Yuktatma, that is important. The person is referred to as Brahma Yoga Yuktatma. Brahma Yoga means Jnana Yoga. Brahma is Agam, Atma Brahma. Brahma Yoga is a recognition of Atma being Brahma, Brahma Yoga. Brahma Yoga meaning Jnanam. Here it is Jnanam. The recognition itself is a yoga. Yuktaha, endowed with, means Jnanam, endowed with the Jnanam. Therefore, Brahma Yoga Yuktaha, Atma is Antakaranam. Therefore, the mind is endowed with or resolved in the knowledge of Brahma. Therefore, Brahma Yoga Yuktatma. Brahmani Stitaha, as it was said before. Brahmani Stitaha, Brahmi Stitihi, Sthapragyaha. Brahma, Atma being, meaning here the mind. Therefore, Antakaranam. The Antakaranam is not after the Ananda which are derived from the sense objects, but it is now Swarupananda. It is Brahma Yoga Yuktaha Atma San, therefore Akshayam Sukham, that is Atma Sukham, Ashnute, he gains when? All the time. Then this is a person who gains happiness, that is oneself. Brahma Yoga Yukta Atma, Atmani Sukham Vindate. So Brahma Yoga Yukta Atma referring to Jnana, it's a beautiful word. Brahma Eva Yogaha, Brahma Yogena Yuktaha Atma Antakarnam Yeshamte. The compound to be resolved this way. Atma Antakaranam, therefore Brahma Yoga Yuktatma, referring to the person. So therefore Atmani Sukham Vindate. Sukham is, the nature of the Sukham is Akshayam. That is said in the next sloka, next heading. Relative and absolute Sukha. Sukham are of two types, relative Sukham and Akshayam, and absolute Sukham. The relative Sukham are Sukham which are obtained in this world and also in the other world up to the Surga Loka. The Sukha which is obtained are subject to disappearance, subject to change. A question might now be asked, how much Sukha is there in the Atma? How do you quantify it? There may only be a little of happiness, like the happiness what one gets from eating ice cream For example, eating ice cream. Such happiness comes, but it also goes. For Brahma Yoga Yuktatma, is this the kind of sukha that is there in the Atma? No. Bhagavan says, the sukha in the Atma is sukha that doesn't wane. Sukham akshayam ashnute. There is a song, the theme of which is that if you give love away, it will grow. In other words, it doesn't get spent or die. Similarly, here, the sukha in the Atma is a sukha that is independent sukha, that doesn't depend on anything, any person, any object, any situation. It is sukham akshayam. If it is akshayam, it has to be you, yourself. Therefore, it is swarupa sukham, atma sukham, swatmanandaha, ananda swarupaha, atma. Therefore, discovers this swarupam of atma. There's a knowledge of the atma, brahma, atma being brahma. Therefore, satchit, satyam jnanam anantam brahma, anandam. Therefore, that is swarupa. This verse also can be looked at as a description of two different people by taking two lines separately. Another interesting way of interpreting the shloka. The first line describes a karma yogi. Bhagyasparsheshu saktatma vindat atmani yat sukham. Referring to the karma yogi who is not carried away by fancies. Bhagyasparsheshu asaktatma yaratma antakarnam. Therefore, the person is not carried over by the Vishayas, external objects. And the second line describes Jnani, who is endowed with the knowledge of Brahma Yoga Yuktatma. So if we look at this shloka in this way, then there are two types of sukha. First line talks about Karma Yogi. Second line about the Jnani. Therefore, a first line, a person who doesn't depend on any external object or situation for his or her happiness, whether she lives the lifestyle of a sannyasi, Karma Yogi, has a certain attitude, a cheerfulness and contentment with whatever there is. Triptihi, whether it's a Karma Yogi or a Jnani. Karma Yogi also, because he is a yogi, he has awareness of the Lord, so he does karma with the yoga buddhi. Therefore, certain tripti, ananda is there. Because the karma, what he does, is for Ishvara artham karma karoti. Therefore, there is certain contentment, happiness, tripti. And because of this attitude, the person gains a greater degree of sukham. Greater degree compared to whom? Compared to the other people who work for sukham. That is karmi. Because of this attitude, the person gains a greater degree of sukha than a person who is entirely dependent upon the presence of desirables and absence of undesirables. Is after compared to the person who is after sukham and who doesn't want dukkha. He works to avoid dukkham and he works for sukham, gaining sukham. Compared to that person, this karma yogi, the happiness what he gains because of his attitude towards karma. Therefore, that is a greater degree of sukha. That is the first line. The later sukha, that is karma yogi sukha, is definitely going to be more short-lived. Sorry, the later sukha is the sukha of the karmi. The sukha, what a karmi, that is karmi does karma for gaining immediate happiness, short, transient happiness, short-lived happiness. Compared to that, the sukha, what a person, the karmi yogi gains, it is greater. The later person sukha is definitely going to be short-lived. That is the sukha which the karmi earns by gaining the desirables and avoiding undesirables. That is short-lived compared to the sukha of the person who doesn't depend on the situation. That is karma yogi. For example, you may like tofu, but it may not be served the way you want it. You may like it as it is and may come to you fried. Therefore, there are comparable degrees of sukha that people get. All over the world, it is the same. Generally, people are dependent for the sukha upon desirable things coming and undesirable things going away, staying away. So compared to karma yogi enjoys better sukha. What about the jnani? That is absolute sukha. The sukha of maturity. Suppose, however, there is a person, because of an inner maturity, is able to find happiness, a cheerfulness in doing what he or she can do. Karma yogi. Here karma yogi is talked about. Such a person also definitely gains some sukham because of a prayerful attitude, acknowledgement of the Ishvara, therefore Ishvararpana buddhi and prasada buddhi. Prayerful attitude means it is yoga buddhi. The person picks up a sukha, he gains sukha that is not totally dependent upon his raga or dvesha. The sukham is not born out of raga and dvesha. Sukham born out of raga dvesha is a sukham of a karmi. Sukham not born out of raga dvesha, but out of maturity, the prayerful attitude, that is a sukham of a karma yogi. So therefore, because of the prayerful attitude, the karma yogi also enjoys sukham that totally independent of raga dvesha. Instead, it depends upon the person's sense of satisfaction. He has got tripti, some relative satisfaction, relative contentment. This is the person who begins to discover that there are certain things that are to be done and enjoys doing them as an offering to the Lord. Ishwararpana buddhya karma karoti. Because the person is quoting the Lord, so to speak, he or she will naturally discover a certain joy. This joy is born out of maturity, inner maturity, yoga buddhi. Because of this love or cheerfulness that the person enjoys, he or she is not held by, not controlled by ragadveshas. The more you become free from ragadvesha, the more sukha, the greater degree of sukha you enjoy. The quality of sukha, the sukham also becomes subtle sukham. The freer you are free from ragadvesha, the more you can enjoy small things. Even the stars will be enjoyable to you. There are many things in life you can enjoy without fulfilling your likes and dislikes. Thus, the person who is bhagyasparisheshu asaktatma gains sukha in the mind, doesn't depend upon the objects. Therefore, even if the person gives us something, he or she doesn't really miss it. Again, there is sukha, a sukha which is limited, but definitely better than the sukha which is gained by the person who is totally dependent on one's ragadveshas. Even though here the sukha gained by karma yogi is limited, but still it is better compared to karmi. The sukha obtained by the karma yogi is better than the sukha which is obtained by the karmi. Karmi cannot live without the objects for which he has raga dvesha, whereas karmi, presence of objects doesn't dictate his sukham. He enjoys sukham. Compared to karmi, he enjoys better sukham. But that is not also absolute sukham. It is the sukham which is better than the sukha of a karmi. Therefore, the sukha of the person who is committed to raga dvesha is going to be very limited, very chinnaman. It's not going to be lasting. It is transient. It changes. The same sukha will become dukkham later also possible. Therefore, whereas the one who is not in the hands of likes and dislikes, raga dvesha, whether a karma yogi or sannyasi, he has a certain disposition, the mental disposition, that attitude, because of which attitude or knowledge, attitude in the case of karma yogi and knowledge in the case of jnani, as a certain disposition, because of which happiness is gained in oneself. Atmani sukham vindati. Here Atmani referring to in oneself, in one's mind. So this way we can Atmani sukham vindati in one's mind. This is about the person who is free from raga dvesha with the attitude of yoga buddhi, does karma, you can say. Now what happens if the same person, bhagyas parisheshu asaktatma, becomes a brahma yoga yuktatma, becomes a jnani? By withdrawing from the world of likes and dislikes, raga dvesha, the person definitely gains some sukha. But when this person becomes one with Brahma, then what sukha he enjoys? When the person's mind is alive to the knowledge of Brahma, what sukha will the person gain? The sukha which is limited or relative, such a person gains a sukha that doesn't wax or wane, doesn't subject to change. That is Swarupa Sukha, it is Akshayam Sukham. Therefore, the Sukha that is the Swarupa of oneself. Therefore, we see in all of this then an order. For one whose mind is not attached to external objects, there is Sukha for Karma Yogi. Not because of the objects, but because of the attitude, because of the cheerfulness of the mind, the Tripti. This is due to Antakarna Shuddhi. Tripti means Antakarna Shuddhi. Satisfaction means Antakarna Shuddhi. Antakarna Shuddhi, the purity of the mind, the cheerfulness of the mind, not because of the presence of the objects of likes and dislikes. And if such a person becomes a Brahma Yoga Yuktatma, Jnani, Brahma Yoga Yuktatma means Jnani, then the Sukha gained will be one's very nature, unlimited, and it is eternal, it is unlimited, aparichita, Purnam. It is Purna Sukha. That's why Purnaha, Purnamadaha, Purnamidamiti. The significance of context. Thus, this shloka can also be seen as reflecting this order. If Shankaracharya were here, I think he would agree with this latter interpretation, given that it holds with what was said before and what was said later. Whenever you interpret what is said differently from the Shankaracharya's interpretation, you must see that it is contextually proper. Otherwise, anyone who knows what it is all about can easily prove you wrong. If, however, having understood the context properly, you are able to see another thing, one doesn't go against anything that is said and fits better into the context, you can present it and the tradition will accept it. The point is made here. So this latter interpretation is Brahma Yoga Yuktatma Sukham Vindati. That is, as long as it is in keeping with the interpretation of Shankaracharya. When you interpret what is it differently from Shankaracharya's interpretation, then you must see the context. You must see that the context that is contextually proper. Otherwise, it will be proved wrong. Shankaracharya himself often views a verse in 2 or 3 different ways. So here what he says is a shloka can be looked upon in different ways. One has choice, but as long as it concurs with the tradition, it's not a problem. So this shloka, the first shloka referring to karma yoga, second shloka referring to jnani. So there is no problem. There is a krama user. Karma yogi gains relative happiness when he gains jnanam. When karma yoga gets jnana yogyata, therefore shastra vichara, ajnana vritti, jnanam he gains the ananda which is himself. It is because it's swarupananda. Therefore, it's fine to interpret a shloka in that way. But not that by karma the person gains sukham, which is akshayam sukham. No, that we don't accept. Therefore, the interpretation should be in keeping with the vision of the tradition. Even though you have flexibility to interpret a shloka in more than one ways, but as long as it concurs with the view of the sampradaya, it is fine. Otherwise, anyone who knows what is all about can easily prove you wrong. So Shankaracharya himself views a verse in 2 or 3 different ways, a practice that tradition allows, provided, of course, that facilitates understanding without hurting what the Shastra says grammatically, contextually, and logically. So all these things. Even if it is grammatically wrong, we have to see the Tatparyam. So we cannot go by grammatical alone. We cannot go by logic alone. We have to see the context also. So many factors are involved in understanding the shloka. So if the shloka concurs grammatically, contextually, logically, then that is the meaning. It may be logical, but not contextual. Then we have to give the logic in keeping with the Shastra, Shruti Mata Tarka. Because the tradition thoroughly analyzes the Shastra before giving its meaning, it's called Mimamsa, Vichara, then presenting any other meaning requires utmost care and consideration in terms of what has been said before and what is said later. That is very important. What is said before and what is said after, they should match. It's called Shadling, Upakarma Upasamhara, Shadlinga, 6 lingas are there that we apply to arrive at the Tatparyam of the Shastra. So therefore, what is said before and what should said later should concur, should not differ. Then it will be, then if it differs, and then that is not the meaning of the shloka, the words of the Shruti. So therefore, the latter interpretation, what Swamiji says here, the first line talks about Karma Yogi, second line about the Jnana Yogi. So Karma Yoga is a means to Jnana Yoga, and therefore becomes Jnani, gains Sukham Akshayam. That is the meaning. So Karma Yoga means any yoga. There are some people who interpret the shlokas of the Gita that for the shloka, 2 lines are there. Each line can be divided into 2 quarters. There are some shlokas like that. First quarter they will say Bhakti, second quarter they will say Jnanam, third quarter will say Raja Yoga, fourth quarter they will say the Karma Yoga. Therefore, they will say synthesis of yoga. It is not. It is against the tradition. It is against the tradition. Not all the yoga lead to jnanam. Only jnanam alone. Not all the yoga leads to moksha. Only jnanam alone gives moksha. Jnanam is moksha. Any other yoga other than jnanam is only a means for gaining jnana yogyata, adhikaritva, to become a qualified person. So therefore, it is not synthesis of yogas. All path leads to the same goal. That is not accepted. What all path? All path means all yoga can, all different types of yoga can be the means for gaining chitta shuddhi, antakarna shuddhi. But moksha is only by jnanam, because ajnanam is the cause. Therefore, jnanam should be the means. So therefore, there is no. It is not being narrow. It is the truth. It is not being fanatic. It is the fact. We'll stop here. We'll see 22. Another beautiful shloka next class. Om Purnamadah Purnamidham Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadhaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.
धन्यवादः।
Dhanyavadaha.